Hello, my name is Robert Taferner. I'm the JALT 2023 Conference Featured Speaker Liaison. I would like to introduce featured speaker Marcos Benevides. He will be holding a number of workshops and presentations during the conference. Marcos, let's start by introducing yourself.
Sure, thank you, Robert. So I started my career, I guess, as a JET program participant in Okinawa about 25 years ago. Actually, exactly 25 years ago this week. We're in August right now, via the JET program. And then after that, I taught part-time at a few universities there in Okinawa. And around that time, my first course book called Widgets, a task-based course in practical English, was accepted for publication by Pearson. I guess you could say that book pretty much helped to kickstart my career. My career has had a kind of inverted trajectory compared to what is typical maybe in our field. I published my first book first and then sort of got some of the academic accreditations that we normally get. Normally that happens the other way around, right? Yeah, for a few years now, I've been a tenured assistant professor at JF Oberlin University in Tokyo. I coordinate the English program here, and I also manage a publishing company called Atama-ii Books. That allows me to do a few things that I think are interesting. For example, I teach a third-year seminar on ELT materials writing. So by also managing a publishing company, I get to sometimes to publish some of my own students' work as well, which is kind of fun to be able to do.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Sounds like you've had an interesting career. And I met you 25 years ago, pretty well. So we've known each other for some time. So it's nice to see everyone's career go off in whatever
Right. And actually, I should mention that being part of JALT, we met through JALT in Okinawa. Being part of JALT really has been crucial to my career development. I don't think my book, for example, would have been published if I hadn't been connected to some of the people that I was connected with through JALT, and meeting some of the publishers that I met through JALT at conferences and things like that. So maybe this is a little plug for JALT.
I agree with you. Without JALT, many of us wouldn't have been here for so long,
Right.
and certainly wouldn't have known how to proceed with our careers, for example. So I think JALT's a great organization, and it's got links to many other associations around the world too, which helps us out. Now, let's move on to talking about the workshops and presentations you'll be giving at the conference.
Right, so I've got two featured speaker workshops that I have planned right now. The first one is sort of maybe challengingly titled, "In the Age of AI, All Teaching is Task-Based." Task-based learning is one of my big passions. But the guiding idea here with this workshop is that a principled communicative approach, which is what TBLT is, isn't necessarily undermined by these changes that we're seeing in AI technology and translation and so on. And in fact, they can even be enhanced by these technologies. I think there's been a reaction from many teachers to basically shut down technology in the classroom and to go back to pen and paper. I think that's valid in certain cases, but I think at the same time, these technologies are here to stay, and they are going to change how people do things, not simply how we educate. And so basically the thesis of my presentation, what I suggest is that we shouldn't ban these technologies, but rather adapt our teaching approaches to include them and to use them in a useful way. And I think TBLT in particular, project-based learning as well, scenario-based approaches like the action-oriented approach that's sort of taking off in Europe these days. I think these approaches are they're inherently accepting of these kinds of technologies because they focus so much on meaningfulness and being able to do things that have a kind of a real world outcome. And so they're inclusive of these kinds of technologies. And I think it's important for teachers to perhaps think of it in that way.
So what would you recommend to the what will attendees to your presentations and workshops, what will they, what will they leave with after they attend your session? What will be in their minds, and what will they try to implement in their own classes after hearing you talk?
Well, so I think they'll come away with a deeper understanding of communicative approaches that are principled, right? I think on one hand, we have teachers these days are not against a communicative approach like task-based learning or project-based learning. I think the great majority, if not all, teachers these days are accepting of these approaches. I think the problem is the practicality of how to implement them in the classroom, and especially when it comes to assessment, which is what my sort of research side of the research hat I put on is dealing with these days. Assessment of TBLT, grading in the classroom can be a little bit difficult to do. So the problem is one of practicality. And so what I hope that teachers will come away from these workshops is being able to, in a practical way, apply TBLT principles to being able to teach communicatively and in a way that is accepting and inclusive of some of these technologies, in a way that it enhances what a student can do in terms of project-based work, for example. It enhances the project rather than create a kind of a cheating opportunity, which is kind of a reductive way of looking at these technologies.
So what do you think, like we see AI in our world now, I guess in our schools and our classrooms. And you mentioned a lot of people are going back to maybe traditional approaches to teaching because maybe interacting with the internet and the computer all the time, it really may take away from learning experiences or potential. But maybe there's another way to look at it and saying, okay, like AI is here to stay and here are the benefits. Can you say that like very clearly, maybe how we can be proactive using AI or using these technologies?
Yeah, the problem is that it's a complex issue, and methodologies, approaches in the classroom, they're always complex. People have a tendency to want this silver bullet that's always going to work in their classroom, and that's been the case for decades. It's always a complex problem, and I don't mean to suggest that AI will solve all kinds of problems for us. What I'm suggesting is that when we consider all of the factors that are involved in a class and a program, we can, if we understand how all of these approaches work and what are the benefits of these various approaches, we can then find places where we can use some of this technology, maybe not all the time, but some of the time. And just to give an example, in the program that I actually manage here at Oberlin, we have actually asked teachers to do essay writing in the classroom in a paper-based way. That's because the demands and the requirements of these particular courses, and also the practical requirements, because most of the teachers are part-time teachers who have many other schools that they teach at. They can't pay the kind of attention to every single student that is required if you're working with some of this technology that could lead students to, just take shortcuts. So in the case of our own program, we've decided that this will work better for these particular projects that we do. But we do have other sort of technology-oriented aspects of our program that we bring in. So being able to bring these in a considered way, I think, is the key. It's not as easy as saying, oh yeah, let's embrace AI technology, because it has to be an embracing that is also principled. And I think this is where task-based learning helps, because task-based learning has some very clear principles about communicative teaching that can be applied to things like AI technology. Sorry, that was perhaps a longer answer than you were expecting.
This is a discussion that could go on for quite a long time. In some of my research, I'm looking at something called processability theory and like staged learning. And so does task-based learning also have like a staged approach? First you like a less cognitively demanding, and then it goes on to something that's more cognitive.
Right. So the way that it's structured, if you look at Mike Long's theories, for example, he sets up what he calls target tasks, and target tasks are what is actually done in the real world. And then from there, you work backwards and you have pedagogic tasks all the way down to very simple things that teachers do in the classroom. And pedagogic tasks begin they're very simple at the beginning in terms of complexity. And then they build in complexity until you get to that real world level. So if you think of something like, for example, let's say you want to set up a kind of task or project about getting your students to learn how to apply for job applications. The job application is a target task that is in the real world. We know what it looks like. You can modify that application form down to very simple levels where you're simply inputting your name and address and basic skills and things like that. So that's basically how it's done. Now, what AI can help with that is it can easily generate, dozens of application forms that then you can have the students do that are all slightly different from each other. This is where knowing about the approach, knowing some of the principles of the approach can be helpful because, so for example, TBLT research suggests that doing a task many times over leads to improvement. Not surprisingly. But as teachers, we know that just having the student do the same task again and again doesn't work in the classroom. It's boring and demotivating. So finding a way of putting those two together is difficult, but AI can help by providing us with various iterations of the same thing that can then be used in the classroom, just as an example.
Okay, that sounds great. We all look forward to attending your workshops and presentations, and we'll see you very soon at the conference. Good luck.
Thank you. And actually, if I could just make one quick shout out at the end, there is a task-based SIG. The TBLT SIG is organizing a roundtable in Yokohama in November 4th, which is just before JALT, with a special guest, Martin East from the University of Auckland. And I'll be presenting there, and these kinds of discussions will be happening there as well just before JALT. So if anyone's interested in TBLT, please try to attend that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.